Chained Echoes is a modern turn-based JRPG set in the beautiful, well-crafted, fleshed-out continent of Valandus. Many will flock to Chained Echoes for its nostalgic-filled gameplay acquired from other games that have laid the foundation for this popular subgenre. I think something Linda was really hoping for. Those who may want to stick around and listen to the comparisons to these foundation-laying games, I suggest to move on for it being frequently mentioned. My knowledge of JRPGs is very basic. The best I can offer is my slightly above average knowledge of Pokemon. While there are plenty of monsters in Chained Echoes, sadly none of them seem to fit in your pocket. The game starts out with a unique story trope never once seen before. 3 kingdoms are at war and have been for several generations. Eventually a time of peace is met because a nuke-like weapon was set off, terrorizing the entire continent, and no kingdom will claim it as their own. A year after the peace treaty was signed, a festival occurs, celebrating the hopeful upcoming years of tranquility. This is where most of your party's story begins. As you follow Glenn and Co. throughout the world, you learn of their stories and reasons for teaming up. Most of these characters are unique in their own backstory, some more than others. Many of the characters are likable in their own way, except for one. Overall, the initial world building for Chained Echoes is very good. While it may be easy to point out similarities it shares with its predecessors, I did enjoy the world design as a whole. The writing, on the other hand, needs some work. Some have pointed out in other reviews there are some awkward deliveries of lines, possibly due to English not being the developer's first language. I personally didn't notice it, but that's not necessarily my complaint. My issue comes with the amount of lore and poor pacing of its delivery that is tied with it. Chained Echoes has a tendency to dump mountain-sized piles of lore on you time after time again. Sometimes it is multiple topics, characters, or locations all being introduced at once and at the time of their introduction have very little relevance to one another. This causes all sorts of forgetfulness and takes away the impact of the delivery that some lines may hold. I feel mixed about this because there are some scenes I really enjoyed with a good build-up and climax to many parts of the story. Though there is a ton of dialogue in Chained Echoes, so you could argue it's because a broken clock is right twice a day. Maybe that is too harsh of a statement because there are some themes introduced very late into the game I absolutely loved, but also had the issues of being too shallow and arguably rushed. I think Chained Echoes would benefit greatly from some type of glossary you could easily reference so you could better navigate through some of the disorganized information constantly thrown at you. Regarding the impact of the writing, like in true JRPG style, there are a lot of hits and a lot of misses. The 16-bit pixel art style used in Chained Echoes is done so on a masterful level. While I may not play many games with this art style, it is easily one of my favorites. The combination of the steampunk and fantasy themes mesh well here even if the theme is unoriginal. Many characters, enemies, and areas are vastly detailed, have their own color palettes, and are generally unique from one another. Characters found throughout the world, including those in your party, are easily identifiable and look phenomenal. The art for their faces during dialogue isn't as great, but doesn't take away from their model. Animations outside of combat are also not up to par, but are easily made up for the animations in combat. Enemy variety ranges from cute and cuddly to my sleep paralysis demon I often find sitting in the corner of my room. I think I counted a total of maybe 3 or 5 enemies reused and painted a different color to depict which element they are. Overall, the true champion of the enemy designs are the countless number of bosses you will encounter. Not a single boss is used more than once, and each design impressed me more than the last. In regards to the levels, there isn't a single area that feels like a copy from another. I'm sure if you cared enough, you could easily point out reused textures, which I think is to be expected considering there's only one developer. Each area is extremely detailed and is a pixel art enthusiast's wet dream. Maybe those experienced with this genre may share a different taste, perhaps calling it generic, a word I would actually use for the sound design instead. There is no voice acting in Chained Echoes, so in order to make up for the more emotional moments placed throughout the story, it has to heavily rely on its music to spark any kind of feeling. The uniqueness I found in some parts of the visual design does not carry over here. While there are 50 songs in total, there are many that sound so similar that I was unable to pick several of them apart from one another without attentively listening. There are naturally a lot of idle tracks used while exploring. These are nothing spectacular, but they're not annoying and they are long enough to not constantly repeat. I would include the combat music into this description as well, with a couple of extra points because it is catchy. Overall, the soundtrack is good, but it is generic. The sounds of combat kind of follow the same pattern. All that matters is that they do get the job done. I will, however, commend the sound of the ultimate abilities because they are sharp and self-assuring that they will actually make a difference. Exploration in Chained Echoes is one of its strong suits. The areas are mapped out in 4-quadrant grids, sometimes with multiple levels. The size is perfect. Not too small where there isn't enough space for detail or content, and not too big where you can easily get lost or just trekking over large areas of nothingness. In some areas, you're able to find walled-off caves and hidden glades you can only discover if you pay close attention to the hints carefully crafted into the setting. Additionally, there is hidden treasure in almost every area that kind of plays like a minigame. Find 2 symbols hidden on the ground and follow the arrows that point to the same spot, rewarding you with items, equipment, and or money. As you are exploring, there are many NPCs that you will run into that will give additional information or witty dialogue about the area. There are also predefined tasks for each area to complete that give additional rewards for those who truly love the world and want to do more. Later on in the game, you unlock Sky Armors. These nifty mechs encourage the player in numerous ways to backtrack to areas they have already been and explore even more, allowing you to access places you could not reach beforehand. These mechs really give a sense of freedom and I think a true sense of exploration. In Volantis, there are obstacles to traverse, items to pick up, and of course enemies to run into. There are no random encounters in this game, which in my opinion is always welcomed, for they are nothing but a waste of time. You even have the option to avoid fights if you have enough room to maneuver around them. If you're worried that either of those will make grinding more tedious, I'm happy to announce that is not the case. Your traditional RPG XP leveling system does not exist in Chained Echoes. Instead, Chained Echoes uses Grimoire shards, which you acquire from defeating bosses. You then use these shards to unlock new skills or permanent stat boost. After a certain number of Grimoire shards are used, you'll receive a hidden predetermined stat boost, which in a way represents a level. There are additionally no predefined classes for your characters in the game, even though the skills that are available for each character argues otherwise. The skills, stats, and weapons used by each character gives you a pretty good idea of which character should be in charge of what role in the party. In any case, there are class emblems that you can equip to whatever character you choose. These class emblems give you creative freedom in your decision on which character should be what class, but realistically each character is already the best in one area compared to the rest, so it becomes very apparent that there is a right and wrong choice. Once equipped, these class emblems give a stat boost and additional active and passive skills to use. I must admit, a lot of the skills in the game seemed kinda useless or were just very situation specific where I couldn't justify unlocking them. And this went for all the characters. Many of the passive skills especially were never unlocked because you just picked the best 5 and stuck with those the entire game. Why would I pick a passive skill that allows that one character to do more damage to a specific enemy type when enemies are so varied throughout the entire game? There's even Pokemon-like skills where you hit anywhere from 1 to 6 times, heavily relying on RNG, which is a big turnoff to me in any turn-based RPG. Most of my justification for unlocking skills in the beginning of the game revolved around skill types and their availability for the unique Overdrive System. The Overdrive System is in every single fight and is what you'll be battling more than the monsters themselves. The main goal for this system is to keep your arrow in the grain. Here you do more damage, receive less damage, and your skills cost less to use. If you overheat and end up in the red, your party takes significantly more damage. Attacking, using skills, and enemies taking any kind of action raises your overdrive. Defending, switching out characters, using ultimate abilities, or using skills that match the icon in the top left will lower it. There are 6 different skill types which will appear in that area. Using those skill types is your most effective way of lowering the bar. Where this unique system is flawed is exactly here. The icon that appears there is completely random. I don't think this has ever made me lose a fight, but has definitely wasted my time. I've had close fights prolonged simply because the utility, buff, or heal skill type was repeated multiple times in a row, stopping me from possibly dealing the killing blow. There were a number of fights that went on for several more rounds, only because I had no effective way of lowering the overdrive bar without taking a major hit. Bosses in Chained Echoes do not have health bars, so when I'm close enough to overheating, I never risk it, for it could mean an easy party wipe. I think it is important to note here that once you do overheat, it is very difficult to get out. Having 4 opportunities to lower the overdrive bar just went down to 3 and will continue to snowball. I felt a range of emotions from this, for it felt kind of satisfying to be resourceful enough to stay alive long enough, even with the odds stacked against me. Then again, every single fight feels like you're on the knife's edge, battling over a war of attrition. With no XP leveling system, many fights felt like a waste of time, especially by the end of the game, eventually leading to me skipping any I could. Outside of those moments, however, I think the combat is fun, although a little bit frustrating. There are some unique battles scattered throughout, and I really enjoyed those. Unfortunately, I think only the on-foot combat is fun. The Sky Armors have their own form of combat, and you would think this would be one of the biggest highlights of the game when it's actually the biggest disappointment. The amount of frustration I experienced with this form of combat made me come really close to putting the game down for good. Sky Armor combat is similar, but there is no overdrive zone, only a neutral zone and 2 overheat zones to the left and right ends of the bar. You start in the middle of the neutral zone and in gear 1. The skill type icon is always locked, and the way you move the arrow is by switching gears, which you can only do once per turn. Switching gears goes in the order from gear 1 to 2 to 0. Juggling 4 different party member gear selections while trying to do enough damage to win the encounter is a feat on its own. You also have to anticipate when it's the best time to switch gears so you you can restore tech points in order to use skills the next turn, all while trying not to overheat because the enemy still moves your arrow to the right with every action they do. It becomes even more frustrating when the enemy you're fighting is allowed to attack more than once in a turn, a theme that becomes more common in Sky Armor encounters. Ultimate abilities are also missing for the Sky Armors, which I feel like is a missed opportunity. Sky Armor combat is mandatory, and it cannot be avoided by trying those encounters on foot. Damage and health of enemies are multiplied in order to depict the sheer firepower and technological advancements Sky Armor brings to your party and to the world. Many players have found somewhat of a solution to what I would call an unbalanced system, and that is to grind the proficiencies of every weapon for every character in order to get their permanent stat boost, a system that is unique to Sky Armors and their skills. Another solution that I followed in order to be able to beat the game is an online guide to unlock a special hidden armor frame and a new shopkeeper that sold stronger weapons. Both the armor and shopkeeper I would argue are pretty tough to find without any outside assistance. Overall, it feels like an unintended difficulty spike because Linda wanted another form of combat implemented when the previous one has yet to be perfected. My nitpicking does not stop there. My other complaints include poor pacing of character development, the inability to access a menu when in a fight even if you know the fight is lost and you want to reload, a unmitigatable one-shot attack a certain enemy is able to perform and can perform multiple times in a row, the soft cap on skills you're able to unlock because the other options you get are so uninspiring and useless, the introduction to switching out characters to avoid certain debuffs, then that concept appearing only 2 or 3 times throughout the entire game. The list goes on and on. Chained Echoes constantly runs into this reoccurring problem of never knowing when to stop, and that goes for everything. Already having trouble with one combat system? Here's a second. Want more clarity on a specific stat, skill, or debuff? We won't tell you until you're about 20 hours into the story, and sometimes not at all. Did you just go through the lengthy process of upgrading your gear? Here are 10 chests back to back that will surpass everything you just created. Any attempts of trying to get stronger in the game or trying to understand this game will always be undermined by the weird pacing and mechanics scattered throughout it. A number of mechanics like upgrading equipment and inserting gems for passive buffs I eventually ended up completely ignoring because it gives you little to no benefit. The amount of time it takes to combine these gems into something meaningful was way too long. It completely relied on drop chance RNG. Mechanics such as deals where you sell stuff to unlock additional offers I'm completely glossing over because that was simple and actually appreciated. Other mechanics such as recruiting clan members, while completely optional, was just a weird addition. And maybe that is the issue. The optional content that is in Chained Echoes, while appreciated, I think took more away from the game than added, especially when you take into account only one person developed this game. Revisions and prioritizations of certain sections could have taken a hit since there's no additional help. This is, however, all speculation, and I could be completely wrong, but some content in the game felt either rushed, unfinished, or just completely unnecessary. All optional content being squished into the later half of the game I think furthers my point. I think my favorite hiccup in the entire game is having a full party and viewing all of their skills, only to notice one party member is missing half of them. Naturally, that makes you think that something happens to them in the story. And since skill progression is hand in hand with story progression thanks to how linear the game is, you can almost predict exactly where it will happen. A spoiler that is embedded into your own menus is laughable, especially one you can view from very early on in the game. Chained Echoes is completely filled to the brim with content, but none of it's polished. Yet it has so much charm, it has so much potential. I don't think the story is anything to write home about, but some concepts that are not revealed until much later in the game showed really promising, albeit not very fleshed out. I'll admit it was the only thing for a while that motivated me to keep playing, which isn't really saying much. The attempt to innovate the genre should be recognized and respected, but the many imperfections these innovative mechanics produced, it eventually concluded with a frustrating game. Innovations are absolutely necessary for the gaming industry in order for our entertainment not to become stale. The Overdrive system is very unique, and is what makes this game stand out among others. I would like to see a continuation of the series, with another game that builds off of these mistakes. Steam currently lists Chained Echoes as $25 USD, a price I think is fair considering this is almost 30 hours worth of content. If you are a fan of JRPGs, I think I would recommend this game, but with some fair warnings in advance. If you're new to the genre kinda similar to me, I don't think I would recommend it right off the bat. This is a good game. It just needs a lot of polish, but it is a great foot in the door for a very obviously talented developer.